everybody. Ray Burke, Power Wash Store Tallahassee. Want to talk a little bit about bulkhead fittings now, the polypropylene. Typically, Banjo is the manufacturer of those. And we get a lot of questions about, my proportioner or my, homemade mixing valve is not, pulling, it's not priming, I'm sucking air in there. Well, one of the primary problem issues you're going to face is the bulkhead fitting on there. Now, your bulkhead fittings, and we want to talk about bulkheads in general and then talk about also how to troubleshoot some of the bulkheads. Now, bulkheads are typically reverse thread. Most times they're installed in a tank with the nipple side facing up on there. So you've got backside of it. Then you've got a foamy washer right in there. It would go up into the hole you have drilled into your tank. This hard washer goes over that. And then the retaining nut comes back in and screws on. So that is your bulkhead assembly. Then a drop tube would go into these threads, and whatever you would have coming out, such as your 90-degree fitting would come out on that top, hence making the bulkhead assembly right there. So you got a few different moving parts on this assembly. Let's talk about the bulkhead itself and the fitting. So one thing in particular to understand is that if you're not using sealant and thread tape, you're going to have a problem here because these threads will not be waterproof. They will not be airproof at all. The other thing that we see a lot of folks doing is over tightening and causing their bulkhead fittings to split. And this can be true on any type of Banjo fitting that's out there, whether it be a three-way valve like this, a three-way valve like that. Over tightening something is going to cause you problems on there, mainly because the fittings that you wind up screwing into that they're not square necessarily. If you notice, there's a little bit of almost like a piece of candy corn. It's a little bit angled. Probably a little more pronounced on this fitting, which is not a Banjo here. And, we have a tendency to go in there and really just, okay, it's tight. Let's keep tightening it and really get in there. So your thread tape and your sealant, we typically use the True Blue here, is going to affect it in a couple of ways. One, it's going to take up a little bit of space, and the thread tape is spongy, and it'll help to keep you from cranking down too hard to where you get a split on these things. Same way with the thread tape itself. So it gives you a little bit of a little leeway in that. Also, that helps to make the threads now airproof and leak proof, so you're not going to be sucking air into these Banjo fittings. Polypropylene, which is what this Banjo is made out of, is given like a B or a B plus for material handling for sodium hypochlorite. There's also disclaimers on their website that it is reactive to strong oxidizers. Sodium hypochlorite, bleach, is a strong oxidizer. So these things will wear out after time. And I would say if you've gotten more than 2 years on a bulkhead fitting, you're on borrowed time, and it's a fact of life. It's going to wear out and it's going to split because the nature of the beast, everything that we touch that comes into contact with bleach is going to eventually wear out. And we abuse the stuff, and a lot of times it's on a trailer and not necessarily secured down so well, and it bounces around like crazy. One of the things that you want to look at whenever you start sucking air on these fittings is a very small crack along in this area right here. And a lot of times it will occur right where that molded, I don't know if you can see that, right where that molded seam is, because this does have a seam already in there. And it might be just damn near a microscopic crack. I got to put my cheater glasses on to see them a lot of the times. But just that small of a crack will wreak havoc with your systems, with your metering valves, with your proportioner. It's going to allow water into the system. And one of the common questions that I hear all the time is, Ray, well, if there's a crack there, won't water flow out of it? Won't I know there's a crack there because I've got a fluid, bleach or water or soap flowing out of it? Not necessarily. You can have a crack that does not allow fluids to come out, but you could have a crack that will introduce air into the system. So always look at your bulkheads as a primary source of failure. It's a huge, big failure point on so many of these systems. And when we put these on, we want them to be, hand tight, and then maybe a quarter of a turn past hand tight. Don't even necessarily like to use wrenches. I mean, I like hand tight, and then, another little quarter of a turn after you've got your sealant in here, because like we mentioned before, this thing is shaped like a little bit of a piece of candy corn there with this angled fitting. It's real easy to get this in there a little bit too far, and then you're exerting a lot of inside pressure on this that will eventually cause it to split. But this is a real good area to look at for a split. And in fact, whenever you get an initial, start getting an air leak, having problems with your bleach not priming, first place that I would look at is my check valve. And I'm sorry, I just said check valve. That's the next video. First place I would look at would be my bulkhead fitting. Second place I would look at would be my check valve, because this so many times will wind up being the culprit, a small split right in this little bulkhead that could wind up causing you fits and keep you from being able to prime your system or maintain a good solid flow out of that. A lot of times on these systems, we might be able to get it primed. And I don't care if you're using a 12 volt, a Comet, which is like over that shoulder, a booster pump. I mean, air is our biggest enemy on here. So whenever you get air into the system, and you might be fighting through the air, but then all of a sudden, whenever you stop and you let off the trigger and you start spraying again, at that point, you're sucking more air into the system and can lose prime. So your problem may be intermittent. You might be able to suck through the air gap at some point, but the problem will continue on, and eventually it will get worse. But that's another reason that a lot of people think, oh, well, it can't be a bulkhead problem, because I have been able to spray out of it some. Still, I maintain you should always get in there and check your bulkheads on there. Other common problems we see with loss of that then is on this side of the bulkhead, where you've put your drop tube down in there, which that's what this assembly is. If we've lost or had a split in the drop tube itself, could be a problem. And I've even seen on rigs, it was very, very confusing to us, but one of my personal rigs we had, there was a split like along in here in the drop tube. So this thing would spray amazing until the bleach, until that was exposed, until that split was exposed. Say the split in this pipe right here was about halfway down. We'd start out the day with a full tank of bleach, and then later in the day, whenever it reached that breach, we'd be sucking air in that way. So Whenever you get problems on anything, whether it be a 12-volt, a booster pump, or even the Comet, whenever you start losing prime, look for an air leak to start with.